In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up on this week's programme, as Cypriots struggle to meet their household bills, the government has come up with a plan to give tax deductions to high-earning foreigners.
Discrimination against Cypriot employees. A foreigner, so-called professional in Cyprus, with an income of 60,000 euros per year, under this tax scheme, would just have to pay the same amount of annual taxes, that is about 2,200 euros, the same as a more lowly paid Cypriot employee earning 30,000 euro per year.
And we meet an author and teacher who is using history to teach young people in schools about mindfulness and good citizenship.
Going back to education, in order to make things better, I think we need to train our children in compassion and in kindness and mindfulness, because at the end of the day, it will help them as human beings.
We're going to talk now about money and particularly about tax, about which regular listeners know that I know very little indeed, which is why it's a great pleasure to welcome to this week's programme Les Manison. He was formerly for many years with the International Monetary Fund. He's worked for the Finance Ministry here in Cyprus, and he is now a well-known financial journalist. Les, thank you very much for joining me, and the reason I asked you to come on the programme is because I saw a story about the tax department saying that it was going to give some tax exemptions or lower rates to very high-earning people in Cyprus. And it just struck me as rather odd that the very people who could afford to pay more tax are going to be offered the chance to pay less.
Yes, I would agree with that, Rosie, your assessment. I consider that the government scheme to attract highly paid professionals to Cyprus through exempting 50% of their income earned in Cyprus from taxation is problematic in many ways. Firstly, it amounts to discrimination against Cypriot employees. A foreigner, so-called professional in Cyprus, with an income of 60,000 euros per year, under this tax scheme would just have to pay the same amount of annual taxes, that is about 2,200 euros, as the same as a more lowly paid Cypriot employee earning 30,000 euro per year. In fact, the foreign professional under this scheme would end up paying 80% or 8,625 euro less in taxes per year than a Cypriot earning 60,000 would have to pay in taxes. This is grossly unfair and just increases economic inequality, rather than taxing the very well-paid individuals with higher tax rates.
I know this is part of the idea that we should be attracting highly paid people to come and work in Cyprus, but that's also having a knock-on effect, isn't it? A very disastrous one for a lot of young Cypriots in the housing market.
Right, no, I would agree. And, I was going to say that secondly, bringing high-income professionals to work and live in Cyprus will just aggravate the housing crisis situation for more lowly paid Cypriots, especially for the younger generation. And these foreign professionals can afford to buy or rent houses that are already in short supply, driving property prices further up in the process.
How is this proposal going to work? Because the newspaper said it was for non-residents of Cyprus, and that if they came here, they would be eligible for all of these benefits.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be sort of non-residents employed overseas for at least 15 years, but would come and work in Cyprus and probably work for, foreign companies in Cyprus. And they would be taxed, their income, or 50% of their income would be tax exempt.
I can't get my head around the thinking behind this, since we know that there is so much tax evasion here in Cyprus.
Yes.
This is surely just going to, in a sense, add to that, because people who are earning 50,000, which I think is the cut-off point now for these visiting persons, and as long as it's over 50 rather than as it used to be over 100,000, they will get this deduction. It'll mean that other people who are earning either 50 or less in Cyprus are going to think, why should I pay my tax?
Exactly. It just promotes tax evasion, which is really prolific in Cyprus.
How do you think we can change that? I mean, I've been trying for a long time to get hold of our Research and Innovation Deputy Minister to talk about why the tax department isn't connected digitally to so many of the other government departments. That would mean things could be cross-checked and maybe have a little bit of a dent in this evasion of taxes.
Well, I think that, it's in some ways it's really deliberate policy to allow all this tax evasion. I think they're not serious, and that the tax administration department really has to be overhauled, and they may become serious about combating tax evasion. And also, one has to reform the tax system to make it more progressive, so that higher paid persons are taxed more.
How could you go about trying to ensure that rejigging, if you like, of the tax department so that it was easier to spot who was actually not? A lot of people don't even file tax returns, do they?
Exactly. Yeah, no, I think, there should be an obligation for everyone to file tax returns, and this tax-free threshold of €19,500 per year, that has to go away. If you look at other countries, there's no tax-free threshold. For example, in Israel, there is no tax-free threshold, and you're taxed at a minimum of 10%.
So you're saying that everybody, regardless of what they earn, should pay 10% tax, but then I'm presuming you're also...
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that everyone should basically have to submit a tax return.
But then
regardless of their income.
How do you make sure that tax is incremental on the amounts?
Well, you just have to have a schedule, a progressive rate schedule, which you do have in Cyprus now, but it has to be made more progressive.
So what would you like to see?
Well, I would like to see, a tax-free I would get rid of the tax-free threshold, and then start off at really about 22,000 per year, around about, I'd say, 10%. Now, I think you have to reform the system so that lower and middle income persons have less tax burden. Now they're paying a lot of taxes just through the VAT and so on.
Yes, people don't often think of VAT as being a tax, but it is, isn't it, that everybody pays?
It's everybody pays, and look at what inflation has done. Inflation has really increased the VAT payments to the government, which has allowed them to increase revenue without taxing the big boys.
And now this new exemption apparently is applicable for a maximum period of 17 years. So does that mean that if I move to Cyprus today, because I've been living abroad for 15 years previously, even if I'm a Cypriot, do I qualify, or is it only third country nationals?
I am not sure about that. I'm really not sure.
Okay, but let's assume that I can also then, as a Cypriot, come back. For 17 years, I'm going to be eligible, even if I get, an increase in my salary?
Yes. you're going to be eligible as long as you're making, I think, over 55,000 euros a year.
And there aren't an awful lot of people, I don't think, who are making that sort of money anyway. So it's got to be the very highly
so
paid.
they're not eligible. Only the rich people are eligible, which sort of goes against, equality. It's just more inequality.
There hasn't been a move, I think, from the last several governments to even look at the discrepancies in what the citizens of Cyprus pay. Do you think we should have a commission, if you like, to look into how tax could be more fairly distributed?
Yes, I think that's what is needed. I mean, in fact, I have sent proposals to the Minister of Finance about reforming the tax system, but I got no response.
I think we all know that we very rarely get responses from government departments.
Yes.
Les, I will just say, do keep pushing them, because it does seem grossly unfair, and it's particularly a bit like a custard pie in the face when we look at the current cost of living crisis and how so many families are struggling.
Yes, so many struggling, yes, and there's just great discrimination against employees in the private sector. They're being exploited.
Yeah, and meanwhile the public servants are getting increases and COLA and everything else, aren't they? That surely is also going to add to the government's payroll. How does that stand in terms of our fiscal policy?
Well, it just keeps on getting inflated. With the inflation and the VAT and that, they've been able to, pay high government salaries. But eventually when inflation comes down, I think, and the way the government is spending now on populist measures and so on, I think that you're going to get into a situation where the government may be in deficit, or what usually happens, they just cut backs on some essential expenditures like social services, on education, and on really public investments.
But they keep building roads. Extraordinary. Well, we've been talking about income, of course, but there are also a lot of people in Cyprus who own 2 or 3 properties, or who own, hotels and businesses and so on. Do they get taxed on that wealth?
No, property taxes are very low in Cyprus. There's really no central government property tax, which has been really abolished a few years ago. So I would really recommend that a progressive property tax on properties be introduced in Cyprus. Wealth inequalities in Cyprus are higher than most other European countries. For example, I think the top 10% of the wealthiest people in Cyprus own over 62% of the wealth.
That's quite shocking.
That's quite shocking. You look at other countries, even Greece, it's the top 10% only own 43%.
And that could be, if you like, equalised a little bit by a change to the taxation system?
Well, changing the taxation system, both on income and really introducing a decent property tax would help.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. I don't see anything changing very soon, but hopefully there is somewhere at the end of a very long tunnel a light for all those people who are looking at their tax bills and thinking, how am I going to manage this? It's certainly not going to happen for most people, is it?
No, it's not going to happen for most people, and the trouble is, even if you get a crisis, probably the same people will be brought into power.
Hopefully it means that we're not going to have to call in outside help, and we'll see the troika back because we can't balance our books. Les Mannison, financial expert, formerly with the International Monetary Fund and our Finance Ministry. Many thanks for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thanks very much, Rosie.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
How many times have we talked on the programme about our education system and whether it serves our children well? I think most people would agree that it doesn't. And one person who's trying to put that right is Andreas Dimitriou. He's a teacher here in Cyprus and he's written a fascinating book. Andreas, thanks for joining me. First of all, explain to us, if you will, why it is that you decided this book needed to be written, because it's not just about educating children in the conventional sense, is it?
Sure. The reason behind it is I worked in schools for 10 years, and I remember it well when we had a public speaking competition at our school, where students were free to choose any topic they wanted for their speech. And the majority of students chose to talk about the anxiety, the stress they experience on a daily basis. Students aged 12, 13 years old took turns explaining that they suffered from panic attacks and depression. And I remember well that I said to myself, and what do we do as teachers to help them with this? The things that we teach them might be inadequate. So if the next generation is suffering from anxiety, I felt that it was our duty as educators to help them. And that's from my own subject, history, and focusing on things that are important, on personalities, historical figures that managed to do something great for their communities, and develop personality traits that we can also develop in order to help ourselves and our society. It starts from there, and during the pandemic, due to the situation of the pandemic, I started creating digital resources and I started uploading them online, and one thing led to the other, and there's a book.
History's Superheroes. It's a great title because kids these days are very much into their superheroes, aren't they? But can I suggest to you that the average superhero that's in the mainstream these days is not necessarily the best person to base your character on?
The average superhero, you mean the Marvel heroes, superheroes of movies?
Yeah.
Well, History Superheroes talks about real superheroes. I mean, it's a way for children to easily resonate with the idea of superhero, and it's about real superheroes. And when I say real superheroes, I mean historical figures like Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, even Princess Diana, that managed to do something that affected had a great impact in their societies. And in order to do that, they had to develop a personality trait, superpower as I call it in the book, that helped them to face challenges, that helped them to work on human rights, to change their society for the better.
Now, if we look at today's society, would you agree that there's a bit of a disconnect between particularly young people and the society that we're living in? We aren't taught to think about our community, to be kind, for example, to look after our neighbours.
Definitely. I do believe that's right. And I think that's the issue of modern society, isn't it? The fact that we live in an egoistic society, that individuals are focused on themselves mostly, are focused on, go a step further, are focused on profit. That's the issue, definitely, that's the issue. But going back to education, in order to make things better, I think we need to train our children in compassion, in kindness, in mindfulness. Because at the end of the day, it will help them as human beings.
It will also help them, won't it, to think that if other people feel like that, then if they get into a pickle themselves, somebody's likely to come and help them. I think it's this feeling of you're on your own to some degree, isn't it? Let's talk, if we may, about the crowdfunding for this book, because it's not easy to get books published. So I think you've got a crowdfunding event going on. What are you trying to raise? I mean, how much does it cost to publish a, softback, hardback book?
Well, crowdfunding. It's going to be a Kickstarter campaign to fund the book. It's going to be at the end of September, and the goal is $8,000, and it's going to fund the editing of the book, publishing of the book, and the production of all the things that goes along with the book, like bookmarks, special posters for every superhero, badges, textile badge for every superhero after a chapter, because every chapter is a skill, a quality that the reader, the child, can develop. And through the superhero, through that history superhero life. So at the end of every chapter, there is a badge that the kid can get to be resilient, to develop resilience, to be more mindful, to manage to complete the task, the activities in order to become more resilient.
How close are you to your target of $8,000?
The campaign didn't start yet. The campaign is going to start at the end of September. It's going to last for 30 days, and those 30 days, the funding goal will be $8,000, and those $8,000 are repaid for the publishing of the book, the editing of the book, the illustrations that are needed to be added, and all the bookmarks, posters, badge, and wooden signs of superheroes.
Let me ask you about the illustrations, because I've seen an article that shows illustrations in the book. Did you do those, or are you going to hire an illustrator to change them?
Well, there are two illustrators worked on them so far. The book is not 100% ready yet, but yeah, the illustrations are from two different illustrators. I also add some parts in the graphic design, but yeah, the illustrations are from professional illustrators.
So this should be coming out then when? End of the year or maybe early next year?
Yeah, most probably early next year. You can pre-order the book and you can get it in a better price, helping the campaign, of course, to be successful, and at the same time getting it on a better price with all these rewards as bookmark, posters and badges you can get.
And kids do love to collect those sort of things, don't they? It's in English, is that right, Andreas?
Exactly. It's going to be in Greek as well.
I was going to say, have you talked to the Ministry of Education, since this really needs to be rolled out in all our public schools, doesn't it?
Yeah, I did talk with the Ministry of Education. As far as I know, Ministry of Education needs a prototype, a sample, in order to accept it as a book that can be distributed in the schools, but needs 6 months for that. to, I don't know, have a look and be accepted from the ministry. So it's going to go through that procedure, but not yet.
Okay, but the translation will be ready and it could be published in both languages, so perhaps next school year, not this coming September, but the following one, you could be teaching the kids here in this new method.
Oh, definitely. By the way, I do teach the kids in this new method. I have visited 7 schools, private schools in Cyprus, to present the book. Actually, it wasn't a presentation of the book, it was more or less like a workshop, because we complete activities from the book. And the feedback I got, it was very encouraging. I asked the kids to try and be generous as Princess Diana and complete the giveaway challenge in order to give away an old board game, a pen or a pencil, an old book that they have read. And at the end, every item gets a certain amount of points, and they can see their generosity score out of 100. Or another activity, to write a thank you card and complete it having Nelson Mandela in mind. He spent 27 years in prison, and he got out, and he said, now we are going to live together, white people and black people. And he started working even with those that put him in jail. So their challenge is to complete a thank you card and give it even to someone that they believe might did something bad to them. So, yeah, I've seen it. Of course, I did complete many activities at my school with my students, and I've seen it. With my students. I've seen the results, and in a way, it is turning into a workshop.
Well, it certainly sounds as if it's a great tool to try and help our younger kids to learn how to value not just themselves, but other people around them in their class, and sometimes that's lacking as well. I wish you every success, Andreas. Tell us where people can find this crowdfunding link, and you said it's going live in September?
Yes, they can type on Google "Tellus Mind." Tellus, like tell us, but it's Tellus is a Latin word.
Tellus.
Exactly, tellusmind.com. And there is a website that they can find other digital resources, not only on history, but also on biology. And from there, they can easily find their way out to kickstart the campaign.
And if they're teachers, can they use those digital resources, or even parents?
Yes, they can use them. There are schools that use those digital resources, and parents that download those digital resources. About 2,000 parents have downloaded these digital resources in order to use them with their children. Yes, it's there, and everyone can have a look.
It's a great idea, Andreas. Congratulations on your foresight, I would say. And let's hope we send a lot of people to Tellus Mind, that's Tellus Mind, and all those resources that will help your child cope with the very difficult situation that many of them find them in today. Andreas Dimitriou, many thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
In other news this week, July the 12th, that was Wednesday, marked the date on which Thanasis Nicolaou enlisted in the National Guard back in 2005. He was soon afterwards found dead under a bridge in Alassa outside Limassol, and investigators very quickly said he'd committed suicide. However, his mother has always maintained that he was murdered. She said he'd been subjected to bullying and that he'd witnessed drug dealing in his army camp. Well, the ECHR, to which the case finally went, prompted his exhumation, and 2 years ago there were more autopsies showing that he had been beaten and strangled. The case was reopened, and one of the investigators said last year that criminal acts had been committed. However, in June this year, the Attorney General's office announced that no evidence of criminal wrongdoing had come to light. It's a case that has galvanised citizens across the island. Earlier this week in Limassol there was a demonstration, but the big one was in Nicosia on Wednesday, that anniversary of his enlisting in the National Guard, and hundreds of people gathered outside the Attorney General's office, the building where the legal services are housed, to demand justice and to decry what they see as corruption and a cover-up. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.